All right, there are a few in our parliamentary ranks who have resisted the siren call of marching in lockstep with the lefties. One who has resisted it and continues to fight is Liberal Senator from South Australia, Alex Antic. Senator Antic, thanks so much for your time tonight. Why have we got so many surrender monkeys in the parliament?
Well, look, Cory, and thanks for having me. It's quite an intro to follow after all of that wind-up, I've got to say. But look, you're quite right. The truth of the matter here is that what's happened in politics is a little bit like what happens in day-to-day life for people. And so people can cast their mind back to the last dinner party they were at or the last time they were in the coffee room at work. And there was a particularly loud, obnoxious person who was trumpeting some of the things you've just talked about, this radical gender theory or some climate alarmism. The easiest thing to do, of course, is just for people to sit there and acquiesce because, everyday Aussies don't necessarily want to get into that fight. The truth of the matter is, though, politics has done exactly that. And it's done exactly that for decades on in now because conservative politics is ultimately polite. I think conservatives are people who are basically day-to-day people who think that their institutions are going to serve them well. They always have, universities, courts, politics itself. But the reality of the matter is that the left are on the march. They are on the march. The long march is well and truly underway. And as I keep saying to people, while you've been sleeping, the left has been creeping, and it's now starting to get to a very, very serious and very, very pointy end.
Yeah, it's like they decided and they recognised that the institutions were largely run by conservatives who wanted to see them endure and persevere. They are, as you say, polite and try and recognise that people will determine or identify the craziness of some of these things early. But then they've invaded them, they've taken them over and it's poisoned the well, if you will. So there's no area of resistance to push back without getting severely damaged yourself.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we see it all the time. I mean, I think the most marked point in politics that I see when it comes to this kind of acquiescence is the deal. And we used to see it all the time under, of course, the Turnbull government, which would be a very bad idea that forms part of policy, which is effectively a trade-off or a negotiation when it should just simply be outright rejected. Now, I know politics is the art of the possible, and I know that's not always the case. But sometimes politics, conservative politics, just has to push back. It's got to push back against some of the stuff you were talking about, this radical gender theory, this critical race theory. And it's everywhere. I mean, just this week in estimates, I did some cross-examination of the ABC for pushing basically shows that were promoting critical race theory and, other such topics. The truth is, it's everywhere. And if people out there are frustrated, my message to them is, don't get frustrated. What have you done about it? Because this is across the board in society. It may be that you're frustrated with your local council trying to close off Australia Day. Well, run for council. It might be that you're frustrated with your school, where you're involved in it, or you're on the board of the school. We need conservatives everywhere, and we need them inside politics as well, selecting people to go to Parliament that share your values. Because the reality is, Cory, we're not going to win back our country with weakness.
Well, Alex, you raised that and you talk about people's frustrations. I've got to tell you, I've had a lot of communications about the government's adoption of the left's net zero 2050 target. The Prime Minister's flown off to Glasgow for a deep fried Mars bar or whatever they eat over there. This is green folly. Why would the government be pursuing it? I understand maybe they were pressured by this rump within the party that was going to cross the floor and legislate for it anyway. Is there any truth to that?
Well, look, I think that the point here is that we've lost this argument a long time ago in terms of the public space. I mean, I think the left have been so effective because of the things we just talked about, their control of the media, their control of the schools, their control of the universities, that they've sold people a version of climate alarmism that's just not in keeping with reality. And so the community pressures that are out there are significant. Now, what we've seen, of course, this week is very predictable. We've seen the announcement of 2050, which is essentially a slogan, as I've said all week. It's nothing more really than a sort of a slogan created by a global bureaucracy. And the minute that happened, what happens? David Attenborough, all sorts of others come out and say, oh, that's not enough. You've got to push harder. Where's your 2030 target? Acquiescing to the left's agenda is like chasing the rainbow. You're never going to find it. You're never going to keep up. Yeah. We need a generation of political warlords that push back.